In this lesson, we're taking a look at 5 licks using Minor Pentatonic Pattern 1. We're going to cover a range of techniques so you can boost your lead playing on a technical level, but also give you some ideas on how to use the scale and get started writing your own solos and improvising. This is part of my Minor Pentatonic lesson series, which you can find a link for in the description. You can brush up on all the pentatonic patterns there, and you'll also find a link to my Patreon page where you can download guitar tabs for all the material in these lessons and the backing tracks that I'm using, which you can download in straight or swung feel at a variety of different tempos to really help nail your licks in different scenarios. I'm going to be showing all of these examples in the key of A, but you should experiment with in different keys. But for now, we're sticking with the A minor pentatonic, so let's dive in and take a look at the first lick. So there are only 4 notes in this first lick, so in theory it's pretty simple, but there are lots of underlying fundamental elements of lead playing going on, so it's really good for building solid foundations for your technique going forward. So we're just using the middle 2 strings of pattern 1 of the minor pentatonic scale, and we're going to start with first finger playing the 5th fret on the G string. We're going to pick that one. We're then going to hammer the 3rd finger down on the 7th fret. Then we're going to pull off the 3rd finger back to the 1st finger. So far we've just got... And then we're going to finish by picking the 3rd finger note on the 7th fret of the D string. And that's our 4 notes. So we're going pick, hammer, pull off, pick, and then straight away back to picking the G string with 1st finger. And then a little bit faster. Now in terms of technique, there's a little bit of a checklist to keep track of just to make sure you've got everything sounding as good as possible. The first one is to make sure that your hammer-ons and pull-offs have enough volume and they don't sound quiet and weak compared to the picked notes. I've got some videos on good hammer and pull-off technique, so I'll link those in the video cards. The next one is timing. Now you want to make sure that all the notes are equal. You can do this one in either 8th or 16th notes, but basically you want to make sure that you're not speeding up the hammer-on and pull-off legato notes in comparison to the picked notes. So if you hear me play it, you should hear that the rhythm for every note is equal. It's all 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. If you find that you're doing the hammer-ons and pull-offs quicker, it'll sound like this. So the rhythm of the notes becomes unequal, so you want to avoid that as it's going to make it much more difficult to speed up and it's not going to sound as neat. You can use a metronome to help you do this, so start really slow. Even if you're just doing 1 note per click, that'll really help keep you super in time and make sure that none of the notes are faster than others. And just start really slow and gradually raise the speed of the click as you become comfortable with it. Next, I want to talk about neatness and clarity. Now the first thing I want to discuss regarding this is string muting. Now I've done a video on this, so I'll pop a link to that one in the cards as well. But essentially it's a good idea to get your first finger to mute excess strings so you don't hear any open strings ringing out and creating any sort of unwanted resonance. So if the first finger is playing this first note on the 5th fret of the G here, I'm going to make sure that the underside of my first finger is lying down, just touching the B string and high E string. And then if I accidentally pick one of those strings, or when I do the pull off, if I flick those strings accidentally with my 3rd finger, they're not going to ring out and it's going to keep the lick nice and tidy. And I'm also using the tip of my 1st finger to touch the D string as well. And that basically means at the end of the lick, when my 3rd finger comes off the D string, it's not going to make the D string ring out because the 1st finger is always going to be touching that D string, keeping it nice and quiet. Now the next point when it comes to neatness is the 2 notes at the end of the lick, where we're going from this 1st finger on G string to 3rd finger on D string. You want to make sure that you're only ever pressing 1 finger down at once. So it's probably quite hard to show in a video from this angle, but if I just go between those 2 notes, hopefully you can see that as one goes down, the other one lifts up. And it's only a very subtle change, like I'm not lifting the finger right off the string, otherwise I'll end up with open strings. I'm just lifting each finger when it's not playing to just touch the top of the string and keep it quiet, and that avoids any sort of harmony notes like this. Instead we just get this nice sort of monophonic melody. It can help to just practice those two notes alone, just picking between the two strings to get used to that, and then put that technique into the full lick. And as you can hear, there's only one note ringing out at a time. It's not sounding like this. But you can hear that clash between the two notes at the end. And finally, just a quick word on picking. If you watch the demo at the start of the lick, you can see my picking hand. So I'm doing down first, then the hammer on and pull off, then up picking the D, and then down picking again on the G. So down, up, down. You could also try inverting that, so starting with an up pick on the G, so up, down, up. You could try doing 2 down picks if you're more of an economy picker, but my advice would be to try and throw some alternate picking in. And my final point is that you want to learn to adapt your licks to get more use out of them, and this is a really good one to start doing that. The first thing you could try and do is play it in a swung context rather than a straight context, so it might sound a little bit more bluesy. So before, when I was talking about keeping all the rhythms equal, that's very much if you're playing along to a straight rhythm, so that's when you'd have your... If we swing it, we're going to purposefully delay every second note, and it'll sound like this instead. So, you know, if you're playing along to a... That would be how you successfully adapt the lick to suit that rhythm. So rather than 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, we have 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, just giving it that swung rhythm. The next thing that we could do to adapt this lick is try using it in different areas of the scale or in different scales, but if we stick to pattern 1 for now, obviously I'm using the middle 2 strings here, so I'm on the 5th and 7th frets. But if I was to throw it onto the top 2 strings, so the high E and B strings, remember we'd be using 5th fret and 8th fret in this pattern, so that would look like this. But the concept of the lick is exactly the same. And also if I move it onto the B and G strings, remember we've got 5th fret and 8th fret on B, but 7th fret on G. So I'd have to use the second finger. It's still the same lick, but using different fingers to play it because of the scale pattern. That would look like this. And we could also use it in different patterns as well. So we could use it up in pattern 2, and pattern 5. And it's such a versatile lick that you can basically use it in any pattern. And once you get used to playing it in different places, you can chain licks together. So if I use it to descend pattern 1, that would look like this. So you can also extend your licks by doing that as well. And now it's time to take a look at lick 2. So here we have a descending pull-off based lick. We're going to start with the first finger on the 5th fret on the top string, third finger on the 8th fret, and we're going to start with a pull-off, so third finger to first finger. Move that down to the B string and do the same thing. Then as we follow the pentatonic pattern, bring the third finger into the 7th fret, pull off to the first finger on 5th fret. Same on the D string. And then at the end, we're going to pick that 5th fret on D string again and then hammer the third finger down on the 7th fret, which is the root note, to resolve the lick. So from the top, we're going pick, pull off, pick, pull off, pick, pull off, pick, pull off, pick, hammer. And then a little bit quicker. Very much like the first lick, there's a few technique things to keep an eye on. So once again, you want your pull-offs to be a good volume and not too quiet compared to the pick notes. You want to make sure that your first finger is always muting the higher strings so you don't catch the open strings as you're pulling off the string when you descend in the scale. And once again, you want equal timing. So we're going to have that 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, rather than this sound. So you need to learn to not do the pull-off straight away when you pick and just make sure you hold that note to keep everything nice and equal. And also you want to make sure that every note lasts long enough to fade into the next note. So you have to learn to move the first and third finger at a slightly different time. If we move them both at the same time, we're going to have this. And you're always in that gap, but instead you've got to hold the first finger on the previous string for just a little bit longer, and then once the third finger's gone down, first finger can transfer as well. So if I just show you what's going on there. So notice that the first finger only moves after the third finger note has been played, and that's how you get the notes to flow from one to the other. If you're playing along to a swung backing track, of course, you can swing this one as well. Then we'd have this. So rather than 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, we'd have 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. And just a quick word on the picking. The way that I'm picking it is I'm going down, up, 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 down. But you could alternate pick the whole thing. So you could have down, up, down, up, down. Or you could probably get away with up picking everything. Again, more of an economy picking style technique. So up, 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 and then you might want to down pick the last note, just so your picking hand changes direction. The only thing you really want to avoid is doing all down picks. Just because you're heading physically up towards the ceiling. So if you're doing down picks in the right hand, you're having to pick a string, then move physically above it, pick down again, physically above the next one, pick down again, and it's just super inefficient and not good for speeding up your licks. But that is the second lick, and now on to lick 3. So this is a really simple lick that's quite easy to speed up. The main reason I've included this one is to get you used to playing triplets. Now a triplet is where we squeeze 3 notes into what would normally be a 2-note gap. So rather than 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, we have 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet. And you can hear that in the lick. Everything's played in groups of 3s. So to actually play this lick, we're going to start with the first finger barring the 5th fret on the B and high E strings. That's just going to stay there the whole time. And we're going to use the 3rd finger to play the 8th fret on the top string. We're going to up pick that one, pull it off, then down pick the B string. And then go straight back to up picking that 3rd finger on top string and repeat again. So pick, pull off, pick, pick, pull off, pick. And then the bend on the 8th fret of the B string is a good way of resolving that lick as well. Other things that are worth mentioning with this one, you could use the little finger on the top string instead of the 3rd finger, if you have a preference for using the little finger. And in fact, you can try it out in certain places in all of these licks if you prefer using the little finger to the 3rd finger when you have that 3 fret gap. And also just a quick word on the picking. So I described using inward picking. So when I'm doing my version of it, I'm always picking towards the middle of the 2 strings. So that would be starting with an up pick, doing the pull off, then a down pick. However, you could do outward picking as well, where we invert it. So that would be starting with a down, then pull off, then up. So the pick is always between the 2 strings and picking outwards. I do have a video on alternate picking that explains this with some better angles and things like that, so I'll pop a link to that in the video cards. But the main thing to practice with this lick is getting used to feeling those triplets. So it's mainly to help you expand your rhythm and feel capabilities. And now moving on to lick 4. I'm not sure if this technique has more of an official name, but I've always called it the bend and grab, because I always explain it to students as bending one string and then grabbing another. On the face of it, it sounds quite country-ish, but it's definitely usable in the rock world as well. There's plenty of examples of guys like Slash and Mark Knopfler using these kind of licks. So we're going to start with a tone bend with the 3rd finger on the 7th fret of the G string. That's the bend part of the bend and grab. And then the grab comes with the little finger, just playing the 8th fret on the B string. Now if you make sure you get the pitch of the bend right, when those two notes ring out together, they should sound quite nice and in harmony. If you overdo the bend or underdo it, it's not going to sound as nice. Try and give you a couple of examples of that. Or underbending it. You can hear it's not quite sounding as nice as when you get it perfectly in pitch. So after we've done that bend and grab part, we're going to go back to picking the G string, release the bend, and then resolve to the 1st finger on the 5th fret. So we've got... And the other variation of this one is to actually bar the top 2 strings with the little finger. So I'm going to bend the G, bar the top 2, pick the high E and B, and then release the bend. So variation 1, just one little finger note. Variation 2, little bar with the little finger. And even when I do the 2nd variation, if I play all 3 notes at once, you should hear that they kind of form a chord. It's all quite harmonious. And that is how you play this bend and grab lick. And now on to the final one of the lesson, which is lick 5. This is a great style of lick for fast flourishes during solos, and actually I find it easier to play these kind of licks faster because you don't have to hold the bend for as long. You can just use momentum instead rather than physically holding the strain, so it's kind of like the guitar equivalent to time under tension when lifting weights. So what we're doing in this one is we're starting with a 2nd finger bend on the 7th fret of the G string for a tone, then using 1st finger to play 5th fret on B string, and hammering the 3rd finger down on the 8th fret, and then going back to the bend on the G string and repeating again. So you could play it with the next set of fingers along, so that would be doing the bend with the 3rd finger, 1st finger still playing the 1st note on the B string, but then little finger playing the 8th fret. So we'd have... Might be good for training your little finger to get some good strong hammer-ons. So go with that if you have a preference for using the little finger, but I prefer stretching 2nd and 3rd. And another point is that you want to make sure the 1st finger is positioned once again so it's touching the string below, which in this case is the G string. So when the 3rd finger is done with that bend on the G, the string is going to snap back into position under the 1st finger and you're not going to end up with resonant G string noise. The rhythm we're playing is 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a. So you want to just work on gradually speeding that up. And finally, just a quick word on picking. I'd once again advise alternate picking, so I'm picking down, up, hammer, down, up, hammer. But you could invert it, so up, down, hammer, up, down, hammer, up, down, hammer. I think once again, the alternate picking is a good option for this one and going to get you some good results in terms of raising the speed. And that is the final lick for today. I hope that's given you some good ideas of licks to get started with in pattern 1 of the minor pentatonic scale, and also help develop your lead guitar skills a little bit. Now it's time for you to experiment, so try using the licks in different areas of the neck and in different keys, and also try using them in different musical contexts so you learn to adapt your licks to suit the rhythm of whatever music you're playing along to. Remember, you can download guitar tabs and backing tracks from my Patreon page linked in the description, and you'll also find a link to the Minor Pentatonic playlist there as well, where you can brush up on all the patterns as well as exploring some other concepts. Be sure to subscribe for more lessons, and I'd really appreciate you giving the video a like if you found it helpful, and I'll see you for another lesson soon.